Welcome to Exhibition. And hello, Telly Tu'u.
Hello, Richard. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for this.
Oh, look, a
Really
pleasure. Lovely to see you there. And your exhibition is Mingle at King Street Gallery on William. And you've said that your Samoan culture has actually been really critical in how you see your paintings. In what ways has it been so important?
It's not only how I see my paintings, but it's also why I'm so comfortable in the abstraction. Like I grew up in Samoan culture where all the art that surrounded us was abstract, like traditional tablecloths, even now a series of patterns. The Samoan bear or malu tattoos, body tattoos, there are a series of patterns that have been abstracted from nature. And also grew up in a household, you know, which is normal for a lot of Pacific Islanders to all live with their cousins all in one home and their grandparents. And in my grandparents' home, they spoke Tuvaluan, Tokelauan, Samoan, English, Pidgin English, which was what I was really good at.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I went to art school, it kind of didn't take me long to realize that I wanted to be an abstract painter, because it's like this series of painting moves or series of, like, you can just pick from different parts of art history and just create, and it's just, for some reason, it just was just the comfortable spot for me to do.
So are there actually any remnants of those traditional Samoan patterns which influenced you as a child? Are there any remnants of them actually in the works anymore?
No, but the thing is, like, I see myself as a Pacific Island painter. Like, I've been asked this question like a few times, and sometimes it didn't end well, because I would say this is Pacific Island art because it comes from me. I'm just using a different language, and because also I say so. I take ownership of this being Pacific Island art. It's just not what people would traditionally see.
You see the works that you create as being abstract, entirely abstract works?
Yeah, I think so, because I've kind of picked from the main people I'm influenced by are abstract painters. So I just nitpick, and that's the great thing about the history of painting. You can just pick and choose, and then it's such a rich history.
I partly ask that question about whether you see them as abstract because the paintings in so many ways seem to have form. You know, they seem to have explosions, smoke, fragments, movement. There's quite a lot of form there. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, I completely feel that. I mean, I love the idea of form breaking up, or coming together, and certain fragments just being suspended in time. And there's an implied idea of movement and stillness at the same time. It does, especially these latest works, they're a lot more atmospheric. I've done a lot more taking off of paint as much as I put on previously to my last show, because I just like this idea of something constantly moving.
In the statement which accompanies the exhibition from you, you also say that part of this exhibition is an inquiry into what makes a painting interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think does make a painting interesting?
I think it's everything. It's like composition, color, perspective. It could be anything. It could be one mark in a painting I don't even like that I see, and that could make that painting interesting for me. Generally, if I can't stop looking at it, I'm not talking about my painting right now, just through other people's paintings. It's when I keep on having to go look back at it, and then constantly I'm questioning myself, why am I going back? Why do I keep on looking? Sometimes I don't know the answer to that though, which makes it even more interesting. It helps me helps me try to, so as soon as I'm in the studio, I'm thinking constantly, how can I make this more interesting for myself? And then hopefully when it leaves the studio, the viewer will find it interesting too. Because there's a conversation that occurs by myself when I'm in the studio. That's when the conversation initially begins. Me and the blank canvas, trying to figure out what I'm going to do on it. Then when it leaves the studio, the conversation hopefully carries on with the viewer, because that's my job, is to prompt a conversation.
When you have a blank canvas in your studio, physically,
Yeah.
how do you start? How does the process begin?
See, it's usually what's ever left on my palette from the previous painting. It's just, so that eliminates that part. I just start. And then that first initial mark determines the next, and so on and so on. And even that first mark that I put down could determine the last mark. It's a really weird kind of thing that occurs. But starting is the best part, most fun part for me.
Does that mean that the starting is really usually made up of that kind of smoky, smeared, blurry motion rather than the more solid forms?
Yes, this is exactly what happens. So usually because the palette's dirty anyway, so most of the colors end up being really murky, like it. And I came across that purely by accident. And I was a student, and I was trying to be frugal and save paint, so I'd use whatever's left on the palette.
But there is, in a way, almost then a genetic continuity from the previous work or works. It keeps flowing down through all of your works.
Yeah, and I think that's why thematically they all kind of hopefully link up together. But you can see there's the same color in every painting of mine, even if the background's lighter or darker. There's always going to be a residue of the color from previous painting, purely because of using the leftover colors on the palette.
Even going back to your graduation show, I've seen an image from that, and again, it's similar to what you're doing now. It just doesn't look so exploded. There's much more actual concrete physical form there and less explosion. Have things been blowing up over the years, essentially?
No, there was just one painting out of a series. I just wanted to, because it's kind of a strange thing that occurred. Like I've almost gone full circle to the kind of painting I used to do as an undergraduate. Because I was really interested in that idea of like these forms exploding. And I kind of revisited what I used to do, but hopefully these are a lot more sophisticated.
So what is it that you hope the viewer might see or think about when they stand in front of these explosions frozen in time?
It's really what they bring to the table. It's them and the painting having a conversation. I just hope I can hold their attention, especially now during, when social media exists. It's kind of a funny place because the internet's a permanent place. You could do a painting 10 years ago and post it, and 10 years later, either you've kind of developed or honed your craft, or stayed the same. It's kind of a good and bad place to exist.
You mentioned the paint from your palette being used again and again to start the process of a new painting. But how would you describe your relationship with paint? How do you feel about this paint that you're using and smearing and creating form with?
It's kind of a love-hate relationship with me. It's like I can't live without it. And sometimes we get along, sometimes we don't. But I think that's the nature of painting. I really enjoy the process, but then I also find it incredibly hard. The majority of the time, I'm a really slow painter. But it doesn't mean I'm not sitting in my studio for 10, 12 hours trying to figure out my next move. It's the beginning is the most fun part or the easiest part initially, but trying to finish the painting is the most painful part for me, because I kind of always second guess myself. But in a really strange way, it kind of worked for me, because I would put a marker on and then obsess or completely obsess over it, and then the very next day I might just wipe it off. But the residue, what I used to do in the past is completely wipe it off, but now I just wipe off as much as I can, and then the residue of certain lines that left over, I've realized kind of like add to the atmospheric nature of the painting, and I find that really kind of interesting. I think painting is like you've got a series of moves. Everyone's got different moves, and there's muscle memory, and there's this idea that you can just pick and choose, but it's a juggling act for me at the end of the day. So that's when people say painting's really easy, I become really skeptical of them, because I don't think it is. I think it's a tough gig, but it's a gig I'll continue on doing.
Looking at the paintings, there are the blurred, smoky painted areas, but there are also some very, very precisely sharp-edged painted elements. Tell us about those fragments and how you create and decide to create them.
Well, because there's so much, my paintings are so lyrical and there's so much gesture going on, I wanted there to be some certain pauses, and they also serve as anchors as you move hopefully you move your eye around, and they kind of hold you there. And it's just certain marks compete with each other. Some of those hard edge marks will just slightly sit behind a gestural mark, or vice versa. Because I just want to I'm trying to make a painting that has certain pauses, because I think if it swings one way too far, then it's in the way of, if it's all just gesture, then I feel like then the eye just looks and quickly looks for me and then moves on. So those floating hard edge forms kind of hopefully create a pause.
Well, that balance is critically important, and a great place to conclude our discussion today. So, Telly Tu'u, thanks very much for sharing your exhibition with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this. Thanks, Richard.